Hey everyone, it's Elaine. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about the trauma of growing up in a high control religion or religious cult or an authoritarian system. So I just want to preface by saying that I do have my master's degree in education with a concentration in counseling and trauma-informed care, as well as trauma and mental health recovery practices. I'm in the current process of obtaining my associate clinical counseling degree. Um, where I can eventually diagnose and then create treatment plans. So today I wanted to talk about mainly trauma and its connection to growing up in a high control cult religion. Um, and I made this diagram that I've been working on for a while, and I wanted to share it with you guys because it gives a bird's eye view. Excuse me. It gives a bird's eye view of how trauma affects your body and then how that can manifest in mental health disorders. So, as I mostly or mainly do, I share my screen with you all. And this is the diagram that I made, and I entitled it Understanding the Trauma of Growing Up in the Iglesia Ni Cristo, or the INC for abbreviation, a deep dive, healing from high control religions or religious cults. And so the first thing I want to talk about is structure, the structure of the INC. And the tenet of the INC, the I would say the main foundation of the INC is that it's based on the idea that there is a last messenger from God who from the Far East. I heard that a lot growing up as a child. And his name's Felix Y. Manalo. And he was appointed or chosen by God to be a mediator and to help people join the church. He basically founded the church. Um, and so that is like the foundation of how the church was um, founded. Um, and then absolute authoritarianism, I put that as part of the structure and thread of the INC, one of the threads of the Iglesia Ni Cristo, because it does promote authoritarianism in that it's a very strict, rigid structure. It's a closed structure. You can't question it. It's because it says it in the Bible, you can't question it at all. That's what I mean by closed system. So any other knowledge, even the knowledge that I'm presenting to you guys right now, won't have any merit per the INC because whatever's in the Bible, that's what goes, right? And then that's what I mean by absolute authoritarianism. Like think of a parent, right? That's parenting their child and the child is trying to bring up their ideas to the parents, and instead of the parent being like, oh yeah, tell me more about that, son, like, tell me more, like having like an open exchange, it's like, no, I said this and that's it. That's kind of like authoritarianism. Patriarchal system, what I mean by patriarchal system is that it's structured in a way where the supreme, like at the top of the hierarchy, it's mainly ruled by men. So if you think about the structure of the Iglesia Ni Cristo, at the top tier, where would be the church administration, right? Um, it's ruled by men. You don't see any women ministers, and you don't see any women in those higher ranking positions contributing, and you don't really see that. It doesn't exist in that the high ranking church administration. Correct me if I'm wrong, but are there any women ministers? I haven't seen that in the Iglesia Ni Cristo. But the only egalitarian, like equal roles that exist in the INC are the deacon, the deaconess, and then the choir members, which is there's a mix of men and women. And then if you go down the tier of the CWS, their church children's worship service, then you see You would see the teachers of the CWS are mainly women. I believe there are some uh not men, boy teachers in the CWS. Um, and then oppressive practices is another thread of the Iglesia Ni Cristo. So we're unraveling the structure here. I'm trying to, you know, just this is all the main foundation of it so that we're going to go down the diagram and put things together like a puzzle. So with oppressive practices, oppression is like where there's a high control and you are essentially take not you're kind of taking away basic human rights, or there's a higher control, a power that is not allowing the people at the bottom, whatever that is, whatever group that is, I should say, to speak their voices, to um you know have rights, right? So an example of this would be the civil rights movement, which occurred in the 1950s and the 1960s in the United States. And because of the oppression that a lot of African Americans, and not only just African Americans, but um, Mexican Americans, Filipinos, Asians, a lot of those groups were oppressed. And that's what I mean by oppressive practices, that they weren't treated fairly and their rights were taken away. And also I want to mention the women's rights movement as well. Their rights were, they didn't share equal rights with men. And that's why the women's movement, a lot of women protested and they wanted to have equal rights with men. So that's what I mean by oppression. And then narcissistic threads is very common in high control religions like the Iglesia Ni Cristo. And when I say narcissistic threads, a lot of the church administration have these traits of where there is a lack of empathy, a lack of understanding. There's also a lot of power that happens in narcissistic relationships. So that's basically the bulk of the INC. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't like good qualities of the INC, where there's like community and there's like sisterhood and brotherhood, but it's based on a lot of these structural elements. So doctrines and practices that are reinforced within the home, this varies among family to family, but if you have a family that's super into the INC, a lot of the times that will translate within the home. So that looks like strict obedience, no questioning, no collaboration, no flexibility or fluidity. So like I had mentioned in one of my previous videos, if you have parents that are really authoritarian instead of authoritative, then the practices of the church will trickle into the home, and then that can cause a lot of internalized messages that will be embedded in someone's psyche and in their body. It will play out in their body. So what I mean by that is a lot of the times there's messages about like, if you don't adhere to this, this, and this, then that means you're this. A lot of the times you'll hear messages like, if you don't attend church twice a week, if you don't fulfill your duties, then you're not a good member, then you're not praising God, then you're not a good son, then you're not a good daughter, you're not a good person. There's very black and white thinking, and that can be linked to someone feeling like they're not worthy, that they're that that can create a lot of feelings of shame and guilt and fear. And how that affects someone's nervous system, we're going to go into a little bit of science now. So your central nervous system is comprised of your parasympathetic and your sympathetic nervous system. So your sympathetic nervous system is in your body, it is activated when it senses a threat, whether that threat is real, like you crossing the street and a car's coming, or whether that threat is you perceive it to be threatening. So a lot of the times in the Iglesia Ni Cristo, they teach messages of impending hell, that these are the last days. Be prepared for destruction. Be prepared if you don't adhere to this, this, and this, you're going to the lake of fire, which I heard ever since I was 5 years old. So that those messages get internalized in your psyche, and then it affects your nervous system. So that portion of the brain called the amygdala, which is responsible for fear-based responses, when you consistently hear messages like that, you're always kind of going to be on guard. So your sympathetic nervous system is activated. So it can result in certain trauma responses within the body, and it's going to look different for everybody. Everybody has a different body. Everybody has different genetics. So the way it plays out, it's not going to be a same across the board as far as trauma responses go. So let's go a little bit into that. Trauma responses look like fight, flight, fawn, or freeze. I missed one, which is flop, which is a newer term for trauma responses. But let's get a little bit into the trauma responses. So let's take it back to the growing up in a high control religion. I grew up in the Iglesia Ni Cristo, which is a cult. So when you are indoctrinated and you consistently hear messages that you're going to go to hell, or that we're in the last days, so be prepared, it really creates a sense of fear in your body. So the way that can play out for some people, and this is the way it played out for me, and it may not be the same across the board for everybody, but it played out in fawning. And it's a type of trauma response. And so I became a people pleaser. I became codependent. I didn't speak up for myself. I didn't assert myself. So that looks like fawning. And then another trauma response is freezing. So your body just kind of freezes. And you're like, you kind of shut down, you disassociate, you kind of leave your own body. And that, you know what? I feel like a lot of the times when I was like sitting in the like listening to the lessons, I would just kind of freeze and just be like, okay, I'm like listening to these messages, but I'm like, my body is receiving it, but I just felt stuck a lot of the time when I would listen to these lessons, and it played out that way. Another example is flight. So that looks like, some examples are perfectionists, addiction, fight is another trauma response. Like say you feel threatened by something. Okay, I'm going to give an example. So someone is trying to mug you, right? Like you're walking across the street and a robber comes and they're trying to take away your like whatever bag you're holding, or they're just basically trying to steal from you. And then your body is like, okay, your nervous system gets activated and you're like, then you start fighting. And that's another trauma response. A lot of the times in high control religions, it plays out as fawning and freezing. Sometimes it can play out in fighting too. When a lot of people get defensive and they're like, oh, this, I'm gonna fight you, I'm gonna kill you. Like it can play out like this too, which is something that is unfortunate, because it can lead to people losing their lives, and it's not okay. So let's go back to the chart here. So like I said, it can manifest as hypervigilance, like always being on guard. You're jumpy. It can manifest in anxious attachment. It can manifest as distrust in others, distrust in yourself. It can manifest as inability to think critically and use logic. It can manifest as people pleasing, becoming defensive, angry, agitated. It can manifest in somatic symptoms in your body. That's like your heart's racing, you feel sweaty, you have maybe stomach issues. It can manifest in skin problems. And I broke out a lot when I was experiencing trauma in the Iglesia Ni Cristo. because my body was under so much stress. I had so much acne, and I had to go and seek dermatologist because all of that, the trauma in my body was being repressed and it wasn't being released. So it manifested in skin issues for me. So this video is getting kind of long. So I'm going to cut it here, and then I'm going to make a part 2 of understanding the trauma of growing up in the Iglesia Ni Cristo. But we'll end on trauma responses, and how your body is affected physiologically. And it's not going to be the same across the board because everybody's biology is different and everybody's environment is different. No one grows up exactly the same. So there are a lot of factors that impact the way your body responds to trauma. All right, everybody. So I hope this was insightful. I hope that you took something away from it. I will be leaving some recommendations of books, psychoeducation, for you to explore, for you to learn. And like I say with all of my videos, I'm presenting this knowledge so that you can look at things in a new light and take what you will from it and create the life that you want to live, really. All right, I will see you guys in part 2. I hope you have a beautiful day. Bye.